back to the culture. I'm so grateful that we're going to have the next contributor join me. He is no stranger to the Black Star Network. You've seen him all over, Mr. Michael Imhotep. He's going to be schooling me, really, because he is the expert when it comes to reparations. But there has been a movement going on in California, y'all. I'm not sure if you have kept abreast of what has happened in San Francisco. Well, there are indications that local city leaders, after forming a board, a committee, actually, to look into the value of what reparations could possibly be for what Black residents there have lost over time due to injustices of the past, would value. And they came up with, and I know the headline is that $5 million headline per residents who qualify, but there were actually over 100 different recommendations by this advisory board that will now go to the city's main board of governance for consideration. Now, I am so excited, yet even surprised, if I'm being honest, that the movement for reparations has gotten this far, so far that a city the size of San Francisco is thinking about putting a major policy initiative like this forward. Well, we're going to get to the bottom of this, and the devil, yes, is in the details. I want to welcome now, as a guest contributor today with me, Mr. Michael Imhotep. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Suzette, how you doing today?
It is a pleasure and privilege to be alongside you, brother, to be sitting here.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you very much. And again, I am not the most, what should I say, knowledgeable about what has been going on in the fight for reparations. So I'm grateful that you're here and you're going to be able to shed some light on what's going on in San Fran. So what do we have here? I know, again, preliminarily, this is, what should I say, a suggested framework. No one's getting any money just yet. But tell us what you have seen as your initial reaction with what's going on in San Francisco over there on the West Coast.
Okay, and just very quickly, I'm a historian. I don't claim to be an expert on reparations, even though I know a lot about it. Okay,
I hear you talk about it all the time. That's why I call you.
Oh yeah, well, I'm a historian and I study history, law, politics, and economics, but I don't claim to be an expert on reparations. Okay, but what we have here is you have a proposal of a one-time payment going to African Americans who are eligible, who would be eligible in the city of San Francisco, not for slavery, because San Francisco does not have a history of slavery, just as generally speaking, California does not have a history of slavery because California came into the Union in 1850 as a free state, not a slaveholding state. So this would be, according to the article from CNN.com called San Francisco Leaders Show Early Support for $5 million Reparation Payments for eligible Black residents. It says that San Francisco's Reparations Advisory Committee, which was created in 2020 to craft a plan to address institutional city-sanctioned harm inflicted upon African American communities. Okay, so this would be a one-time payment of $5 million, and it's not. Now you have some on the committee who support this. However, generally speaking, understanding the finances of San Francisco, and San Francisco has a $728 million budget deficit over the next 2 years, it's unlikely that this will actually be implemented. Okay, but you have the California Reparations Task Force, which is at the state level. You also have a San Francisco Reparations Task Force as well. And the $5 million were some of the more than 100 recommendations made by a city appointed reparations committee tasked with the question of how to repair the damage of systemic racism, redlining, housing discrimination, things like this in the city of San Francisco.
Okay, wonderful foundation laid, my brother. Thank you for that. This is the CNN article we are referencing, guys. You can go check it out on CNN.com. It's up there. San Francisco leaders show early support for $5 million reparations payments for eligible Black residents. So my question to you, Mr. Imhotep, why is California like the standout? Is it just the progressive nature of politics there? I don't hear this coming out of other states, or maybe there are other similar programs or considerations being made. Of course, we've heard, a couple of cities do things like maybe give housing down payments.
Sure. That was Evanston, Illinois. So let me address that. Okay.
Go ahead, brother. I know you know the background. Go ahead. Yes.
Let's take Evanston, Illinois first, because the person who spearheaded that, her name was Robin Ruth Simmons. I interviewed her on the African History Network show for an hour, okay, to break down what actually happened. Now, the state of Illinois abolished slavery in 1818. Evanston, Illinois, the city of Evanston, Illinois, wasn't founded until the 1840s. You had a lot of woke ass people running around who didn't do research, who said, oh, they should do reparations for slavery, things like this. Evanston does not have a history of slavery. So when you have a city, they're not going to do reparations to repair the damage of something that the city did not inflict. When you look at what San Francisco is doing or what they're proposing, they are saying specifically they are working to repair the damage that the city inflicted upon African Americans, not what the state did, not what the federal government did, because they don't have those type of resources. Evanston, Illinois is a city of approximately 60,000 people with a percentage of African Americans at 16% and declining. They don't have a history of slavery, but they had a rampant history of housing discrimination and redlining. And there's still some African Americans alive today who live in Evanston who were the victims of the housing discrimination and redlining. So this is what their reparations program, the $25,000 vouchers towards housing, was designed to remedy, not slavery. Okay, so when we look at reparations on a city level, and we have a reparations task force here in Detroit, I'm not on it, but I do know people on the reparations task force. They are looking at repairing the damage that the city did. You first have to understand history in your city and the damage that the city did to understand what to repair. California is very progressive because both the state legislature is controlled by Democrats. It's the most populous state in the country, and you have a Democratic governor, and that came through voting. Okay. The 500-page report that they released back June 1st, 2022 is the most comprehensive analysis of African Americans and what has happened to us since the Kerner Commission report came out in 1968. All right. So I encourage people to research what the California Reparations Task Force is doing, and they are going to the proposals for reparations is going to be distributed, if it passes the state assembly, based upon lineage. Okay, you'd have to be able to provide evidence that you are a descendant of a person of African descent who was here prior to 1900, or a person of or free African American here who was in the U.S. prior to 1900. The reason why they have to do it based upon lineage and not based upon race is because in the state of California, race-based policies are illegal. It's illegal to have a policy only for African Americans, and they want to make sure that if anything gets passed in the state legislature, it doesn't get overturned in court, which it will be, because Republicans will file lawsuits, and some brain damaged Negroes will also file lawsuits as well to block it. Okay, now at the federal level, Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination and fairly assisted programs, bans race-based policies. So if reparations happens at the federal level, most likely what California is doing will be the model, because race-based policies at the federal level are illegal as well, which is why if we're seeking a legal remedy to a historical problem, we must understand both law and history.
Well said, brother. Okay, I'm following you. I'm reading the chat. Y'all come on through with your questions. I see a chat member, his going by Oil King, and in his opinion, he has stated that he does not believe housing vouchers, so to speak, to be reparations. I think we need to define terms, because you've laid out, there is a school of thinking that it goes back to, the institution of slavery. There's a school of thinking that there was wrongs committed by law against citizens of African descent and were sanctioned by a local municipality or the state itself or the federal government itself. And we can't get that. And I will talk to you about that after the break, why it hasn't gotten more traction in the federal government. Sure. But nonetheless, so what we have is a hodgepodge of ideas, and I'm grateful for some of the comments. I'm going to bring them up after the break.
Yeah. I need to address that first comment.
Yeah, go ahead and put up Oil King's comment. Thank you, Oil King, for being here. And I'm grateful for all my culture crew who are letting us know how they really feel. But this is what he wrote. He wrote, why is this considered reparations? How do you respond to that, please, Michael?
Well, reparations for what? The concept of reparations means repairing the damage of something. That's why you first have to understand what it is you're talking about. This is why a lot of arguments dealing with reparations I don't get involved in, because I'm listening to people and they don't understand history, law, politics, and economics. Evanston, Illinois has no history of slavery. So why is a city of 60,000 people going to pass a law to address something that didn't happen in the city and the city was not responsible for? The city was responsible for housing discrimination against Black people. Therefore, the city is going to implement laws to repair the damage that they are responsible for. We have to understand what it is we're talking about before we can seek a remedy for it. Reparations, the root concept, means to repair the harm, to make you whole again, to repair the damage of something that was done. You're trying to go in the left direction, but don't understand you should go in the right direction. Now, you need to repair the damage of a legacy of slavery and decades of Jim Crow. It's not just slavery. Chattel slavery ended something like 157 years ago. Decades of Jim Crow segregation, redlining, housing discrimination, voter suppression. What we're dealing with today is the culmination, the accumulative effect of all that what happened after chattel slavery ended when the U.S. Constitution, when the 13th Amendment was ratified December 6, 1865. You have to look at the collapse of the end of Reconstruction, collapse of the Freedmen's Bank, understanding the redlining that was created by the federal government, understanding why you have African-American homes at a value of $48,000 less than comparable white homes, which is a cumulative effect of $156 billion less net worth for African-American homes than comparable white home. So that's dealing with a legacy that happens after slavery ends. So when we deal with repairing the damage of a history of slavery and all that happened after that, we have to change the laws and policies that were put in place that continue to inflict the harm today. Cash payments are not going to do that. Cash payments can be part of a comprehensive reparations problem, but anybody with any intelligence who understands the spending habits of African Americans know damn well if we all got $1 million a day, white people will have it all back by this time next week. And the only thing you would have done is stimulated their economy, but the laws and policies that maldistributed wealth, power, and resources will still be in place, still inflict the harm, and you haven't repaired the damage.
Well, we're doing work over here. Michael is really breaking it down. Let's put up Chris Big. I see your comment there, brother. It says reparations really is the wrong word. Again, we're getting context now to as far as damages go in terms of the law in the United States. Consequential damages is one type of damages we would be eligible for under the law. Okay, I'm getting into the legalese here.
And personally speaking, understanding white supremacy, I would take the name reparations off of it, because anytime you say reparations, it automatically brings up resistance. I would talk more understanding that most of the people who got to vote for these policies are white, especially at the federal level. Okay, I would talk about the actual policies and how it's going to help not just African Americans, but help America in general, because anything that benefits African Americans is going to help America in general. The executive order that President Joe Biden did for student loan forgiveness, that's going to move 500,000 African American families from a negative net worth to a positive net worth, but it will also benefit white people as well. It's going to really help a lot of African Americans, okay, and discharge a little more than 25% of our student loan debt is going to be discharged when you talk about African Americans, but it's also going to help a lot of white people also. So what's good for African Americans is also good for America. So when we present these remedies, when we present these policies, understanding that the majority of the people in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate who have to vote for this are white, you also need to talk about how it's going to help them and their constituents as well, not just African Americans, if you actually want to get something accomplished.
I love it. We're peeling back the layers, y'all, but we got to take a quick break. I'm here on with Michael Imhotep doing work, y'all. This is The Culture. We'll be back with more right after this. Hey, welcome back to The Culture. This is Suzette Speaks, sitting in for Faraji Muhammad. I'm here with my brother, Mr. Michael Imhotep, who is teaching y'all about what it is that's happening on the West Coast over in San Francisco. There has been a movement towards reparations for certain qualifying Black residents, and we're having a robust conversation here. I'm going to put up a few of your quotes. Let's bring back Michael Imhotep now. I see you in the chat, y'all. I see everybody, and I'm going to only be able to read a few. Let's go to a quote I saw by Mimi D726, the Culture Crew regular. Thank you for being here, sis. I see she writes that if the government gave us real reparations, and now this is a contention I've seen brought up many times when this discussion comes forward, Michael, the cost, right? That would bankrupt this country. Are we cool with that? How do we address this when we are having the conversation, whether it be on the municipal level, right? Or whether it be, state, or even next we'll talk about the federal levels. But what about the cost? How do we address that? Because I'm thinking $5 million possibly per resident. who qualifies in San Francisco. Like you said, budgetarily, it doesn't even kind of comport.
That ain't gonna happen. Don't look for your check in the mail if you live in San Francisco. That's what people will say.
Not happening. So how do you respond to a comment like this?
Well, first of all, what are you repairing the damage of? You first have to analyze what happened to African people and analyze the damage that was inflicted to then understand how to repair the damage. Okay, this is why you have to understand the laws and policies that were put in place, the voter suppression, the housing discrimination. And one of the main ways that people have accumulated homes and have accumulated wealth in this country is through ownership of homes. One of the biggest programs to do that was the GI Bill. 1945, 1946, and from about 1946 to 1970, $67 billion was invested into the GI Bill. This gave low interest loans to veterans of World War II and who served in the military to get low interest loans to buy homes, start businesses, and to go to school, go to college. Okay. Largely speaking, African Americans were heavily discriminated against that, even though we served in World War II, even though we earned those benefits and our taxpayer dollars were paying for them. So when we talk about the cost of reparations, one, just giving a check don't solve, just giving a check does not repair the damage that was done. Okay. And then you have people who say, well, our ancestors worked for free for X amount for 246 years, things like this. Yes, there were 262 skills, trades, and crafts that our people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Now, how do you enforce that? What law or that? Now, this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. I don't play games with people. When you understand getting reparations, you have to have a legal foundation to be able to enforce what it is you say that you want. What law are you citing that slaves were supposed to be paid in the first place? Yes, slavery was morally wrong. I agree. Yes, it should not have happened. But when you study the laws of this country, when you study the U.S. Constitution, which is the first legal document that you should read, slavery was sanctioned by the U.S. Constitution. It was legal. So what law are you citing the slaves were supposed to be paid? This is why the legal arguments that we make for this have to be different than a lot of the arguments that have been made in the past. One of the legal arguments, and I've talked about it on this show, deals with enforcing the Black Freedmen and Indian Treaties of 1866, which is what one of my teachers, Dr. Claude Anderson, has been fighting and enforced for years. And then more recently, Attorney Demario Solomon Simmons, who is of Muskogee Creek ancestry and who is a frequent panelist on Roland Martin Unfiltered as well. He's been fighting for that because that is an actual example of us getting some type of restitution or reparations from the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians, who all owned African slaves. And then after the Civil War ended, they were forced by the federal government to allocate land to those Africans that they own and set them free and give them membership in those Native American tribes, give them all the rights and privileges of Native Americans. When you studied Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we love to talk about Black Wall Street. I've studied the history of it, but we don't understand that Tulsa, Oklahoma was founded by Creek Indians around 1834. And when they went into Oklahoma, they took their African slaves with them. And a lot of the early African-American landowners in what will become Black Wall Street, which was that business district, which began at the intersection of Greenwood, Arch, and Pine, a lot of those early African-Americans gained land from those Black Freedmen Indian treaties, which are still in effect today. But many of our ancestors were being pushed out of those treaties starting in 1941. So I'm for what will ever work when it comes to repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, and racism and redlining. To understand what will work, we need to understand the history of what has worked. And what has worked, and there's documented evidence of that, are the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866.
Heck yeah. I'm gonna jump right in here because I say just let him go, because I know this is a passionate subject matter for you. I'm gonna put up another, based on what you just said, sir, you're doing work, quote from Jacqueline Boateng, I think is how you pronounce it, because what you have just mentioned is that there are different aspects of what could be considered, and the term is probably imperfect, reparations. But Jacqueline brings up reparation can come in the form of housing, education, healthcare, employment, and farming. Hello, somebody, because again, Black farmers have been through it. So
we lost millions of acres of land coming from being discriminated against from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I was
going to say,
inflicting harm upon us.
USDA has done by law some of the most heinous things and created the most damage and remove the most land, right, from people of Black heritage. So when it comes to the check, because that's, I think some people are very hung up on the dollar amount, but there's other forms reparations can take. Would it be better? Or is it, like you said, depending on what was lost in the first place as a remedy of what law was in effect in the first place? But talk about the various types of reparations, even here in this specific case in California, in San Francisco, are being considered. Now, the headline gave you the $5 million per person, right? But there were other suggested remedies, over 100, in fact. So can you talk about what other, even in, the broader sense or directly related to the San Francisco proposal, forms of reparations that are being suggested?
Various forms could be free college tuition, going a certain period of year without having to pay taxes. It could be allocation of land. For instance, just generally speaking, when you study the Homestead Act in this country, the Homestead Act of 1862, it gave over approximately 260 million acres of land, largely to white people in this country. They had to maintain the land for 5 years, and they had to pay the taxes on the land. Okay. And then after 5 years, the land was theirs. Okay. Well, you have tens of thousands of families, largely white families today, that still have land in their families that was given starting in 1862, but they gave away land for over 100 years. They kept giving away land up until about the 1970s or early 1980s. All right. Largely, African Americans were locked out of this massive land giveaway. That's the Homestead Act of 1862. Okay. This was legal. And this is an example of how we were being discriminated against. Then you have the Southern Homestead Act of 1866 that gave away about 45 million acres of land as well. So when we study the history here of massive land giveaways, then when you talk about housing is extremely important, because that's one of the main ways that people create wealth in this country. And because of redlining, which was created by the U.S. federal government around 1937, and what redlining did was they took a map and they drew red lines around areas where African Americans lived. And what happened was they made it either impossible to get homeowners insurance or insurance for businesses in those areas, or you had to pay a very high rate. Okay. And then we were discriminated against when it came to get low interest loans. Like when you have the suburbs that are being built after World War II. Okay. You had white people who were able to get 3% down on low interest loans to get homes built out in the suburbs. African Americans were largely locked out of being able to take advantage of those benefits we earn in our taxpayer dollars paid for. So we're locked in the inner city. Then the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 1956 drive 41,000 miles of U.S. interstate highways all across the country, comes right through Detroit, right near where I live. I live where Black Bottom was, right here in Detroit. It wipes out thousands of homes and businesses. This place is about 1 million people. The article that I posted here called Bulldozed and Bisected is an excellent analysis from NBC News that documents this. Okay. Well, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that only 19 Republicans in the Senate and only 14 in the House voted for, that's going to start to repair that damage that the U.S. government did through the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts. Okay, wiping out homes, wiping out businesses. It's going to start repairing those neighborhoods where the expressways went right through. So housing is extremely important, especially now with the cost of housing increasing, because during the 2 years of COVID, they weren't building new homes. So you have a crunch when it comes to housing stock. You think I wouldn't want a house right now? Absolutely. That's one of, really tell you the truth, that's one of the first things that we should be going after, home ownership.
We got to take a quick break, y'all. I am enjoying this conversation with Mr. Michael Imhotep. I see you guys in the chat. I'm going to read more of your comments, but we got to take a quick break. Much more of the culture, talking reparations, right after this. It's the culture. It's the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm Suzette Speaks, sitting in for Faraji Muhammad with my brother, Mr. Michael Imhotep, talking about reparations and what's going on in California, specifically in San Francisco. A proposal that has gained some traction into helping to make Black residents whole for past wrongs by the city and others. We're talking to Michael Imhotep. I'm going to read more of your comments. Keep them coming in the chat. If you're watching Team Replay, go ahead and leave your comment below, like, and share this video. So let's start with Karen. Karen Canera, I saw your comment, sis. Thank you again for being a part of the Culture Crew today. She said there wasn't slavery in California, and I think you said that too, Michael. Right. There was and is racism. The return of Bruce's Beach, and I love the Bruce's Beach example, to the great grandson was an indication of, was the best example of reparations so far. He sold it back for $20 million. Do you want to make any kind of comparison there?
Well, when you read the articles dealing with the California Reparations Task Force, one of the things they talk about repairing the damage of is the theft of land, like with Bruce's Beach. Okay. And then in the San Francisco area, you have the Fillmore district. Okay, which was a district that was wiped out by expressways, and they had a lot of African-American homes. It was in the 1960s. So there's a good article from the Washington Post from February 27, 2023. San Francisco debates reparations $5 million each for Black residents. Okay, and they talk about the Fillmore district in the 1960s was demolished, and this was a neighborhood once known as the Harlem of the West, and it displaced 883 businesses and about 20,000 people, most of them African American. Okay, so California has a history of this, but we see this across the country. So when we talk about repairing the damage, not just of 246 years of slavery, okay, but decades of housing discrimination, theft of land, racism, voter suppression, etc. Okay, so this is why you have to understand the laws and policies that were put in place that inflicted the harm, to understand the laws and policies that need to be put in place to repair the damage that was done.
Understood, brother. We are going to stay with our audience and viewers. Let's go to another comment. Chris Big, I saw this comment stand out. You wrote, thank you, sir. Compensated Emancipation Act paid reparations to slavery owners at $300 per slave.
That was only in Washington, D.C. That was the compensated. That was the compensated.
Okay.
This is the mistake people make. That was the Compensated Emancipation Act of April 16th, 1862, which was sponsored by a senator who was an abolitionist. It was passed by Congress, signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln. And it was about something like 2,900 petitions by slave owners that only applied in Washington, D.C., that did not apply to all slave owners in the country. All right.
Okay, and we're just gonna finish the quote, and then you can respond as well. So I used that number to come up with $4.9 trillion adjusted for inflation.
The mistake he's making is he thinks that applied to all of the African slaves in this country. It did not. That only applied to Washington, D.C. Go to the Zen Education Project, read the information they have on the Compensated Emancipation Act, archives.gov has it, etc. So this is why we really have to understand what it is that we're talking about. Because I hear people thinking that applied to all the slaves in the U.S. and all the slave owners. No, it did not. That was only for Washington, D.C., and that was in 1862 during the U.S. Civil War.
Okay, very interesting. Y'all teaching me here, and I'm enjoying the conversation.
I'm a historian. I've been studying history 33 years. Google my name. Visit my website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. There's a reason why I'm in 7 documentaries.
Okay, well, I think also maybe and just to play devil's advocate, they perhaps do know it only applied to D.C., but are still using it. Okay, so
most people don't.
If they did not, then we're definitely glad that you have highlighted that. But if they do, I think just the number he's trying to come up with is based on one example. You disagree with that?
Most people don't know it only applied to Washington, D.C. Okay. And the other thing is a lot of people confuse what Great Britain did in 1834 with the Slave Abolition Act, when they abolished slavery, and they paid reparations to 46,000 British slave owners, and they took out a loan for about 19 million pounds, and that was for the 800,000 enslaved Africans. Okay. A lot of people can confuse what Great Britain did with what the U.S. did.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Keeping us on our toes and keeping us accurate. I appreciate you, Mr. Michael Imhotep. We're going to go next to, let's bring up Oil King. I saw this quote, just give me housing. I think when we were talking about housing, sir, this quote was used then. And he said, don't call it reparations. We have plenty of housing programs. So he said he doesn't need the title reparations, although it could be used to make Black people whole. I know you went kind of in depth with that. Do you think that is one of the, I guess, most reasonable or possibly, which I say, you use the word resistance, probably would be least resisted means of providing Black folk?
Coming from the federal government, part of it. See, we have to have comprehensive repairing of the damage. It's not going to be just one thing. It's not going to be just one bill. Okay. Mm-hmm. So home ownership, and not just home ownership, free property taxes. Because see, there's a history of African Americans having their property taxes over assessed, and then we lose our home when we can't pay the property taxes. This is one of the ways our land has been stolen from us. Over assessing property taxes, the heirs' property rights, when it comes to a loophole, when it comes to land ownership. And this is one of the ways that a lot of African-American farmers have lost their land with the heirs property loophole, which is, say for instance, say if 10 grandchildren inherit land, okay, from their grandfather or grandparents, and then one of them sells the land to a speculator, part of their land to a speculator, then there's a loophole that allows them somehow to be able to take over the rest of that land. This is heirs property. All right. When you study this, we've lost millions of acres of land through that. So it can be part of a comprehensive repairing of the damage. But this is why you first have to understand what happened to us. And one of the mistakes we make is we try to start studying our history in slavery. As a historian and as a student of Professor James Small, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and Professor Kabahai Watha Kamene, I have to say, when we talk about repairing the damage and making us whole again, we first have to understand who African people were and what African people had before we were put into an institution of slavery that stripped us of our history, names, culture, spiritual systems, folklore, mores, nationalities, things of this nature, and put us into an institution that put us into the category of chattel. You can't start studying our history in slavery because you missed the thousands of years of history prior to that. So when we talk about repairing the damage, I want to be restored to the level that my ancestors had prior to slavery, not get a check because they didn't get paid during slavery. This is a totally different concept.
I was going to say that conceptually, I've never heard reparations placed as in what we would have been.
I'm trying to tell you, we have to refashion how we think about repairing the damage. You first have to analyze the damage that was done.
That's very deep. I love this question. We got to take a quick break after this. But Lana L says, does the African History Network have a reparations class? I would love to.
We have history classes.
You and me both, sis.
We have history classes that I teach that deal with not just the history of slavery, but thousands of years of history leading up to slavery taking place. I teach that on Saturdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And then the class I teach on Sundays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, the U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power movement. So we deal with understanding, repairing the damage, reparations, things like that in both of those courses. Visit my website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. You can register for those. And I'm also teaching I'm doing a free online lecture Saturday, March 18th, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, in honor of Women's History Month, or Black Women's History Month. It's called Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. So you can register for all that at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. But we do deal with understanding reparations better and repairing the damage and who we were before we were put into the institution of slavery.
I love it, y'all. We have more time. Listen, I got to get to a few more comments. I'm enjoying this conversation on reparations with Mr. Michael Imhotep. We got to take one more quick break, y'all. Don't go anywhere. We're going deep. I'm Suzette Speaks in for Faraji Muhammad. More of the culture right after this. We're we're back. I am Suzette Speaks in for Faraji Muhammad right here on The Culture, enjoying a deep conversation with my brother, Mr. Michael Imhotep. We're talking reparations, y'all, and we're going to bring him back now. I wanted to ask you, brother, about why the federal response has been so stalled. The last thing I remember is Ta-Nehisi Coates doing a wonderful presentation before Congress, making the case for federal level reparations. Where are we now with the federal response? Has the Biden administration made any moves, and why or why not?
Okay, so the biggest push at the federal level has been H.R. 40, which was first sponsored by the Honorable John Conyers here in my city, Detroit, 1989, the year after Japanese Americans, year after the bill to pay Japanese Americans $1.6 billion divided into $20,000 per Japanese American. So it went to about $82,250 for the being put into internment camps during World War II. The year after that, John Conyers introduces H.R. 40. And the 40 comes from 40 acres and a mule, which is special field order number 15. Prior to the coup plotters taking back control of the House of Representatives, you had, according to Congress.gov, 196 co-sponsors of H.R. 40. None of them were Republicans. I've heard that you had 217 co-sponsors. It takes 218 votes to get any bill passed in the House. Now, the problem is in the Senate, you're going to need 60 votes in the Senate. No Republicans support reparations in the House or the Senate, not even the black ones. So even with 51 Democratic senators, and I'm not sure Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema supported either, but you need 9 Republicans to vote for it. At the federal level, what really should happen is we have to push for the policies that we want and take the term reparations off of it. The majority of the people in the House and the Senate that got to vote for this stuff are white. 95% of the U.S. Senate is white, and you need 60 votes in the Senate. Okay. And one of the things that needs to happen. So, for instance, I posted this article here, and I've talked about it here on the show before. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion Citigroup fines. Now, this is an article from September 23rd, 2020. I've done an extensive broadcast dealing with this. And it documents how over the course of 20 years, from the year 2000 to 2019, the U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion due to racism. One of the things this does is it shows how racism negatively impacts everybody in the country, not just African Americans. The same argument that I make when it comes to getting the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed is the same argument that I make when it comes to getting the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed. And the same argument with repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, reparations, and segregation, etc. If you only make this a black issue, you're going to lose when the majority of the people that got to vote for it are white. If you actually, if you can pull up that article, because what it does is it goes and looks at 3 categories, and it says that black workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. Okay, so if you correct that, then they can buy homes, they could buy cars, things like this. This helps grow the GDP. This helps grow the economy. Number 2, the housing market lost $218 billion in sales because black applicants could not get home loans. This helps banks. This helps real estate agents, etc. This helps grow the economy. Number 3, about $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the economy because African-American entrepreneurs could not get access to bank loans. Most importantly, they go on to say the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if those gaps and others were closed today. This is dealing with laws and policies. So when you repair these laws and policies, it helps everybody.
Wow.
So we have to, and what this study does, and there are others like it, it shows how racism is hurting everyone in this country, even though we may get the brunt of it. Okay. So we have to also understand how to market the benefits of correcting these structural inequities, as opposed to just focusing on how it's going to help African Americans when the majority of the people that got to vote for this stuff are white.
Yeah, I've never heard it framed that way, quite frankly.
My degree's in business administration, not history.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, would people rather, and again, maybe commentators would agree or disagree, do you think that the majority population would rather shoot themselves in the foot than actually make money and allow Black people to also make money? Like, that's what that's saying. Is am I incorrect?
In business school, we talk about a win-win proposition.
Right.
If I want a deal from you, I got to explain to you what's in the deal for you, how it's going to help you. Okay. And that, even though you have a lot of people who mean well and their hearts are committed to this, that largely, that's not what's happening. Right. We have to talk about how correcting these structural inequities will help everybody.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. Not even though we'll get the majority of the benefit because we got the majority of the harm. This will help repair America also.
That's amazing.
Policies that are good for African Americans are good for America in general.
In general, I believe as well. Let's go to a few more comments, y'all. We have about 10 minutes left. Chris Big, I saw when you responded to what Mr. Imhotep proposed. Chris's opinion states when the damages begin is a legal question as opposed to a historical one. Thank you for your comment. Let's go to Lana L next. Thank you, sis. She wrote, HR 40 has been dismantled to garbage. Now, if we don't even have the votes in the Senate, nobody is voting for it in the Senate. What benefit does it have? Like, how can we continue to keep it at the fore? Many of us who, support one party or another, mostly the Democratic Party, see this as, something that they have kind of overlooked. Is there a way that the public at large can put this back into, the conversation, at the forefront of the conversation, where many people think it deserves to be, as opposed to kind of like, oh, it's a back burner, and I guess, wait on cities and states to do it instead? What are your thoughts?
Okay, first thing that has to happen is America needs a massive history lesson, because Americans are very ignorant of history. I'm not just talking about African Americans. I'm talking about Americans in general. One of the good things about Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday is if it can become very powerful if we use it correctly, because Juneteenth is the only federal holiday that deals with slavery. Okay, this is an opportunity to have a national conversation of not just about slavery and the harm that was inflicted upon African Americans, but what happened after slavery ended. Okay. The collapse of Reconstruction, the collapse of the Freedmen's Bank in 1874, and African Americans lost $2.9 million in deposits. How our land was taken away after Reconstruction ended, the voter suppression that was implemented. And then also, a lot of people don't know that you have between 8,000 and 20,000 white Southerners who fled the U.S. and they went to Venezuela, Cuba, and Brazil because slavery was still legal there, because they did not want to live under rule of Republicans and deal with free African Americans running around as well. So America must have a massive history lesson with June 1st becoming a National Day of Remembrance of the Tulsa Race Massacre. That's an opportunity for us to have a national conversation of not just the greatness of Black Wall Street, but that ties right into the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866. Okay. Because that's how a lot of early African-American landowners got land to build Black Wall Street, was from those treaties. All right. So we have to understand that, one, America needs a massive history lesson. Two, you have to use that history lesson as a platform to push the policies that have to be put in place to help repair the damage. And three, talk about how repairing the damage will benefit everybody in this country, not just African Americans, when white people are the majority of the people who have to vote for these laws. Now, if we were 70% of the population, it'd be totally different with 13.5%. Okay. Right. And we only make up 2.5% of the U.S. Senate. And I say half because half the time Senator Tim Scott doesn't act like he's Black.
Well, hold on now. We about out of time.
He's against reparations, by the way.
Tim Scott is? Okay.
Tim Scott
if he jumps into the race.
He voted against the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He blocked the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Okay, he voted against Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. He voted against Kristen Clark being a deputy head of the Civil Rights Department of the Department of Justice. He's phenotypically Black, not consciously Black.
All right, now we got to wrap up because there's so much more that we can say about this. I want to get a quick 30-second prediction. Now, this was through an advisory board in San Francisco. Do you think this actually gets adopted by the elected officials in San Francisco?
The $5 million?
Yes, any of it.
I don't think the $5 million is. I think some of the other recommendations will. Now, the real test is what happens when lawsuits are filed. This is why you have to be on strong legal footing to withstand, because whatever you pass, laws get interpreted by the judicial branch of the government, and that can go to federal and it can go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right, we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Michael Imhotep, for doing work today on the culture. Appreciate you coming through. Of course, we'll come visit you. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Please, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, I do have a little YouTube channel going on. Go over to Suzette Speaks. Just look it up on YouTube, Suzette Speaks. And I want to thank my brother Faraji Muhammad for allowing me to fill his very large shoes right here on the culture. I appreciate all the culture fam for watching, commenting, sharing, and for holding us down in general. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'll be back tomorrow, also guest hosting. That's it for us today, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching.
Hotep, everybody. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. So I was on Faraji Muhammad's show, The Culture, today, Thursday, March 16th. And Suzette Speaks was sitting in for Faraji. And we talked about San Francisco, the California Reparations Task Force and the San Francisco Reparations Task Force. And we talked about one of about 100 proposals coming from the San Francisco Reparations Task Force, and is getting a lot of headlines, and it deals with $5 million, a one-time payment of $5 million to eligible African Americans in San Francisco, not for slavery, and also the president of the NAACP in San Francisco, who sits on the committee for both the Reparations San Francisco Task Force, San Francisco Reparations Task Force, and the California Reparations Task Force, Reverend Amos C. Brown, who's the president of the San Francisco NAACP. He has come out in opposition to the $5 million payment. So you have a lot of people putting out misinformation on social media. So I want to give you the facts and break this down, okay? Because you have a lot of people who disagree with the $5 million. I said on Faraji's show is unrealistic and it's not going to happen, all right? So let's look at a few factual articles so people can stop putting this nonsense out here, lying to our people. Let's look first at this article from February 27th, 2023 that I referenced today on Faraji's show. San Francisco debates reparations, $5 million each for Black residents, ? $5 million each for Black residents. Conservatives say the proposal to give qualified Black residents $5 million each would be financially ruinous for the city. And even some reparations advocates dismiss the figure as an unrealistic distraction. It is unrealistic, okay? And it's nonsensical. That ain't going to happen at all. So when we look at this article here, one of the things, I mentioned on Faraji's show today, the Fillmore District in San Francisco in the 1960s, the Fillmore District was demolished, and there was a neighborhood that had about 883 businesses and about 20,000 people. And most of them were African American. Okay. Decades later, thousands of people remain displaced, and the neighborhood has turned into a predominantly white enclave of multi-million-dollar homes. Now, when we look at San Francisco, just like California does not have a history of slavery. So when we talk about repairing the damage, it's not just for slavery, it's for decades of Jim Crow segregation, housing segregation, redlining, voter suppression. It's a number of different things, not just reparations, not just slavery. Okay, so first and foremost, a lot of what we think we know about reparations, we need to discard, we need to throw it away and start at the bottom, dealing with history, law, dealing with facts and evidence. Because a lot of this stuff floating around is just nonsensical, and it's designed to generate revenue for the people who keep pimping our people, lying to them, putting this nonsense out here, and elevate their social media platforms or whatever the hell it is that they're trying to do. Now, to compensate for that and other instances of racial discrimination, the city's African American Reparations Advisory Committee recently recommended that qualifying Black residents receive $5 million each in reparations. Okay. Now there's, I'm going to deal with a more updated article from March 14th, because there's over 100 recommendations that the committee has made recently. Okay. And this came out Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. Now, the if we go down right here, to compensate, let's see here. I want to go to this part right here. Okay, to compensate for that and other instances of racial discrimination. Okay, now next line. There wasn't Eric McDonald, chair of the Reparations Committee and the principal of Peacock Partnerships, a San Francisco-based consulting firm, said there was not a math formula. Quote, it was a journey for the committee towards what could represent a significant enough investment in families to put them on this path to economic well-being, growth, and vitality that chattel slavery and all other policies that flowed from it destroy. Okay. Now, the proposed, end quote. Okay. The proposed reparations program is not a recompense for slavery, not a recompense for slavery. This is the first thing people have to understand, because San Francisco does not have a history of slavery. Okay. The article goes on to say from the Washington Post, slavery was never legal in San Francisco, but instead the committee's report says, for quote, the public policies explicitly created to subjugate Black people in San Francisco by upholding and expanding the intent and legacy of chattel slavery, the intent and legacy of chattel slavery. But California doesn't have a history of slavery, neither does San Francisco. Now, there were about 1,500 people that have been identified as like in a semi-slavery status in California, because when California became a state in the Union in 1850, it came into the Union as a free state. So slavery was abolished. They did try to ban all free African Americans in California under Burnett, the first governor of California. They did try to do that. Now, when you have the gold rush taking place, 1849, 1850s in California, you have African Americans who are in a semi-slavery status, but it's about 1,500 that are identified, and even the California Reparations Task Force would tell you this. Okay, so this basically is not for slavery, just so people understand. All right, now, if we go and look now, Dr. William Darity, who's one of the top authorities on reparations, is against the $5 million being proposed. Okay. Now, if we go to page 2 of this article, it says even some within the reparations movement have dismissed the figure as unrealistic. There are no widely accepted formulas for paying reparations, says Dr. William A. Darity Jr., an economist who has been advocating for reparations for decades, but the number should be, quote unquote, somewhat realistic. Dr. William Darity went on to say, quote, calling for a $5 million payout by a local government undercuts the credibility of the reparations effort, because it's stupid. It's not going to happen. What a lot of these people who are putting this nonsense out here and getting our people hyped up, okay, what a lot of them won't tell you is that San Francisco, and I'm trying to find it right here, San Francisco has a budget deficit of $728 million over the next 2 years. You think they're going to give $5 million each to African Americans, and we're like 6% of it, something like is about 50,000 African Americans in San Francisco. You think they're going to give $5 million each? And they did. Yes, their overall budget is $14 billion, but they're dealing with a $728 million budget deficit. And let me go to, I'm going to show you that here because I have a few articles because I want to deal with facts and evidence here. I don't want to deal with a lot of this nonsense that people like to put out, just lying and pimping our people with misinformation. Okay, let's see here. I think it's in the article from the Washington Post. All right, let's continue. Let's continue with the article from the Washington Post. I'll find. Oh, yeah, it's in the article from Washington Post, page 4. Okay, let's look at this page 4. All right, because I want to make sure we deal with facts and evidence. I'm a historian, okay, and a researcher. Proper documentation ends all conversation. I don't deal with a lot of this nonsense that people want to put out here and hype our people up with misinformation. Let's see. Okay, if we go to page 4 of the article, it's like the third paragraph from the bottom. I would have put that up in the first 2 paragraphs, to be honest with you, if I was writing this article. Right here. Despite being home to Silicon Valley's tech billionaires, San Francisco faces a $728 million budget deficit over the next 2 years. San Francisco faces a $728 million budget deficit over the next 2 years. And even some reparations committee members are critical of the proposal of the $5 million. It distracts from now, this is Reverend Amos C. Brown, who is the president of the San Francisco branch of the NAACP, and he's on the task force for both the California Reparations Task Force at the state level and the San Francisco Reparations Task Force at the city level. He said it distracts from the report's other recommendations, said Reverend Amos C. Brown, a member of both San Francisco and the state's Reparations Task Force. Quote, you can't put a dollar tag on the horrifying and hellish evil that our ancestors went through. He's been the pastor of San Francisco's Third Baptist Church since 1976. He said, quote, but what you can do is implement simple, practical programs that will deal with our health challenges, our educational needs, our economic needs, and creating spaces for us to connect as a community for our cultural needs. Now, what people don't seem to understand, so once again, San Francisco does not have a history of slavery. What people don't seem to understand is that whatever gets passed, there are going to be lawsuits filed, and it's going to have to go to court. And you want to make sure that you're on strong legal footing so that whatever you pass at the city level doesn't get overturned in the judicial branch of government, doesn't get overturned in the courts, because this is what's going to happen. All right. And nobody wants to talk about that. It's just like a lot of the people who said that, oh, all Joe Biden has to do is sign an executive order to forgive student loan forgiveness. That means you don't understand law and don't understand the power that the limitations on the power of the executive branch of the federal government, because his student loan forgiveness executive order had to be very targeted, and they used the 2003 HEROES Act, which already passed Congress, which gives the president the ability to discharge debt during a time of crisis. But he's doing this through the Department of Education and the powers that the Secretary of Education has. So that's why they put parameters on when it came to income under $125,000 income, and forgive up to $10,000. And then if you took out a Pell Grant, you can get up to $20,000 forgiven, to make sure they're on strong legal footing to operate within the power of the executive branch of the federal government based upon the HEROES Act, but also based upon Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution and the powers that the president has. A lot of those people who said all he has to do is do an executive order didn't see lawsuits being filed. They didn't know that was going to happen, and didn't know it's going to end up in the U.S. Supreme Court. And you got a 6-3 conservative majority in the U.S. Supreme Court, thanks to Donald Trump and the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. Okay. And the 78,000 people in 2016 who voted for Trump instead of Hillary Clinton, because Donald Trump won Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by 78,000 votes, which gave him 270 electoral college votes, okay, to become president-elect. So just like they didn't see lawsuits being filed when it comes to student loan forgiveness, and that's going to help millions of white people, even though it's going to definitely help a lot of African Americans, that's going to help millions of white people, they don't see lawsuits being filed here. This is why you have to be on strong legal footing. Okay, now, if we look at this, if we go to page... Let's go to page 2. You go to page 2 here in the article from the Washington Post. Okay, San Francisco's $5 million proposal, which has gained a lot of headlines. San Francisco's $5 million proposal, magnitudes larger than amounts. Let me try to find that here. San Francisco's $5 million proposal, magnitudes larger than amounts being discussed in other communities, has drawn intense backlash from conservatives who lambast the idea as financially ruinous for a city with an annual budget of $14 billion that is still recovering economically from the pandemic. The proposal does not explain who would qualify. Yeah, it doesn't explain the criteria. Doesn't explain who would qualify, how they would qualify. But if even a fraction of the city's 50,000 African-American residents met the criteria, it would consume a huge amount of the city's annual budget. It would consume a huge amount of the city's annual budget. This is just something that's totally unrealistic. That's not going to happen. So what people who have sense of saying is like, it's not even worth wasting time with something like that. That's not going to happen. Let's deal with things that are realistic, that have an actual chance of being implemented. Okay, now, if we go to page 4 here, and it was a comment from Dr. William Darity. This one deals with okay, Dr. William Darity, who prescribed $350,000 each for African Americans nationwide. That's not going to happen either. But this is on page 3. Let me find this. Hold on just a second. Okay, so right here. Meanwhile, Dr. William Darity, the economist says Black Americans should receive at least $350,000 each in a federal reparations program. A federal reparations program. Okay. A figure based on his calculation of the country's racial wealth gap. Dr. William Darity, who's a public policy professor at Duke University, said, we see the racial wealth gap as this core indicator of the cumulative effects over time of white racism and white supremacy on living Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved here. Okay, this is extremely important, this part here. The cumulative effects over time. Okay, this is not just dealing with slavery. This is dealing with decades of Jim Crow segregation, racism, redlining, voter suppression, segregation when it comes to homes, being segregated out of jobs, segregated out of opportunity, theft of land, express 41,000 miles of U.S. interstate highways running through our communities, wiping out tens of thousands of homes, displacing hundreds of thousands of African Americans. That's what this is dealing with, not just slavery. Okay, so you have to understand the laws and policies that were put in place that continued to inflict harm after slavery ended and continues to inflict harm right now. Okay, now, California has established a separate state reparations task force and asked a team of 5 economists to quantify the cost of discrimination that the state's Black population has faced. Now, the team calculated California's maximum liability for discriminatory housing policies, because California does not have a history of slavery, discriminatory housing policies between the years 1933 and 1977, and settled on the figure of $569 billion. That would work out to $223,239 for every African-American California resident. All right. Okay, so check out the rest of this article here from the Washington Post. San Francisco debates reparations, $5 million each for Black residents. This is from February 27th, 2023 by Emmanuel Felton for the Washington Post. Okay, so let's deal with like realistic remedies, not nonsensical, fantastical, simple Simon ass nonsense that sounds good in headlines but is not going anywhere. All right, now you also have this article here from the Associated Press that was picked up by NBC News, and in this article, let's see here. I want to go to. Let's pull this one up. Okay, San Francisco board open to reparations with $5 million payouts. This is from March 14th, 2023. You can read the entire article. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's just a part that I want to highlight. We just look at the first couple of paragraphs here. So the draft reparations plan released in December is unmatched nationwide in its specificity and breadth. Okay, so this was updated March 15, 2023. Now, payments of $5 million to every eligible Black adult. They haven't set the criteria yet, so we have no idea what it would be. The elimination of personal debt and tax burdens. The elimination of personal debt and tax burdens. Guaranteed annual incomes of at least $97,000 for 250 years, and homes in San Francisco for just $1 a family. Okay, these were some of more than 100 recommendations made by a city-appointed reparations committee tasked with the thorny question of how to atone for centuries of slavery and systemic racism. Okay, but California does not have a history of racism. Neither does San Francisco. And the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, hearing the report for the first time, Tuesday voiced enthusiastic support for the ideas listed, with some saving money with some saying money should not stop the city from doing the right thing. If the city don't have the money, it ain't gonna happen. Let's just be realistic. Okay, it's not, stop living in fairy tale land. If the city don't have the money, it's not gonna happen, and you have to make sure you're on strong legal grounds, because when you get sued, that can be overturned in court. Okay, so this is why we have to deal with what's realistic and what you are on legal footing in doing, not something that just sounds like fantasy. Okay. Several supervisors said they were surprised to hear pushback from politically liberal San Franciscans, apparently unaware that the legacy of slavery and racist policies continues to keep Black Americans on the bottom rungs of health, education, economic prosperity, and overrepresentation in prisons and homeless populations. Okay, so are they talking about in the U.S. or San Francisco? Because once again, now I said this on Faraji's show today. What people have to understand when you deal with city-based reparations, the city is looking to repair the damage that the city was responsible for inflicting. The city of San Francisco, the city of Detroit, the city of Evanston, Illinois, is not looking to repair the damage that the federal government did or the state government did, because basically they don't have those type of resources. They're looking to repair the damage that the city historically did based upon the laws and policies that the city implemented. That's why you have to be clear on what it is that you're talking about. The draft reparations plan released in December 2022 is unmatched nationwide in its specificity and breadth. The committee has not done an analysis of the cost of the proposals, but critics have slammed the plan as financially and politically impossible. An estimate from Stanford University's Hoover Institution, which leans conservative, has said it would cost each non-Black family in the city of San Francisco at least $600,000. Even if it costs each non-Black family in the city of San Francisco $300,000 or $200,000, that's not going to happen. I'm just telling you right now. Okay, don't wait for your reparations check in the mail. Especially $97,000 a year for 250 years for African Americans in guaranteed annual incomes in San Francisco. No, that's not happening. Now, in San Francisco, African American residents made up more than 13% of the city's population, but more than 50 years later, now this was this was, I think, in the 1960s. But more than 50 years later, they account for less than 6% of the city's residents and 38% of its homeless population. The Fillmore district once thrived with Black-owned nightclubs and shops until government redevelopment in the 1960s forced out residents. Okay, and you have the expressways that come through and displaced a lot of African Americans. Now, fewer than 50,000 Black people still live in the city of San Francisco, and it's not clear how many would be eligible. Possible criteria include having lived in the city during certain time periods and descending from someone incarcerated for the failed war on drugs. Okay, critics say the payout make no sense in a statement in a state and city that never enslaved people. This is what I'm trying to explain to people. You have to understand what it is that you're talking about. You can't just, especially when you deal at the city level, you have to understand the history of that city. You're dealing with repairing the damage that the city inflicted, not what the state government did or what the federal government did. Critics say the payouts make no sense in a state and city that never enslaved Black people. Opponents generally say taxpayers who were never slave owners should not have to pay money to people who were not enslaved. Okay. Now, yes, reparations needs to take place in San Francisco and California, but it should be based upon repairing the damage of the laws and policies that were implemented by the state of California and by the city of San Francisco. That's what you're repairing. Okay, advocates say that that view ignores a wealth of data and historical evidence showing that long after U.S. slavery officially ended in 1865, government policies and practices worked to imprison Black people at high rates, deny access to home and business loans, and restrict where they could work and live. That doesn't, I mean, they may talk about opponents to reparations in general, but no, this is, even when you read what the California Reparations Task Force is saying, and when they put out their 500-page study, and they talk about what happened in the state of California, they deal with housing discrimination when it comes to bank loans, to get mortgages and start businesses, all different types of things. And they talk about they talk about California primarily. They do talk about the U.S., and they talked about how African Americans have been harmed, you know, throughout the U.S., but they focus on California based upon policies that California implemented. All right. So check out this article also. San Francisco board open to reparations with $5 million payouts. And then there was one from the Associated Press that came out Wednesday, March 15th. Wednesday, March 15th from the Associated Press. Okay, so this one right here from the Associated Press, what's the next step for Black reparations in San Francisco? This is from Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. And so they talk about the $5 million payment to every eligible person, or to any one, or to any of the more than 100 other recommendations made by an advisory committee. It won't be known until late this year. Okay, now let's see, what is the argument for reparations in San Francisco? Black migration. So what's the argument for reparations in San Francisco? This is what a lot of people putting this misinformation out here miss. Black migration to San Francisco soared in the 1940s because of shipyard work, but racially restrictive covenants and redlining limited where they could live. When Black residents were able to build a thriving neighborhood in the Fillmore district, government redevelopment plans in the 1960s forced out residents, stripped them of their property, and decimated Black-owned businesses, advocates say, and decimated Black-owned businesses. Okay. Then you had, you know, Bruce's Beach that was taken in the early 1900s and was worth millions of dollars, and it was recently given back to the descendants of the entrepreneur African-American pioneers that bought Bruce's Beach and built it up, and then the descendants sold it back to the state of California for $20 million. Today, fewer than 6% of San Francisco residents are Black, yet they make up nearly 40% of the city's homeless population, 38% of the city's homeless population. Supporters include the San Francisco NAACP, although it said the board should reject the $5 million payments, $5 million payments, and focus instead on reparations through education, jobs, housing, healthcare, and a cultural center for Black people in San Francisco, because we don't understand our history. That's why they want a cultural center. You need a cultural center to teach our history and understand history, law, politics, and economics, because America is ignorant of history, one, and African Americans are very ignorant of our history. Half our people still think Willie Lynch historically existed. Now, the president of the San Francisco branch is the Reverend Amos C. Brown, who sits on both the statewide and San Francisco reparations panels. Okay. So then they go and talk about the argument against reparations, etc., and some of that I already highlighted. Okay, so you can check this out. It's unclear how San Francisco is going to pay for this. Okay. The advisory committee that made the recommendation says it's not its job to figure out how to finance San Francisco's atonement repair. It'll help if you come up with some recommendations, because they're dealing with a $728 million budget deficit over the next 2 years. Okay, so $5 million, that's not going to happen. What are some of the other reparations recommendations? Recommendations in education, including establishing an Afrocentric K-12 school in San Francisco, hiring and retaining Black teachers, mandating a core Black history and culture curriculum, and offering cash to at-risk students for hitting educational benchmarks. It's not going to be just one. We're talking about repairing the damage for decades, okay, of racism, discrimination, etc. It's not going to be one policy that does it. We have to have comprehensive reparations. It has to be a number of things. You first have to identify the harm that was done through the various laws and policies, then implement multiple laws and policies to address that harm that was done and repair the harm that was done. That's why it's not going to be just one policy. You have to have comprehensive reparations. Recommendations in health include free mental health, prenatal care, and rehab treatment for impoverished Black San Franciscans, victims of violent crimes, and formerly incarcerated people. The advisory committee also recommends prioritizing Black San Franciscans for job opportunities and training, as well as finding ways to incubate Black businesses, Whatever you prescribe, whatever passes at the city level and gets implemented, you have to make sure that you're on strong legal footing, because Republicans and their Negro sympathizers are going to file lawsuits to block what you have passed and make sure you don't get it and take it away from you. That's why I cannot stress this enough. You have to make sure it can withstand legal challenges, because it will be challenged legally. There's no deadline for supervisors to agree on a path forward. The board next plans to discuss reparations proposals in September 2023, after the San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee issues a final report in June of 2023. Okay. All right. Read the rest of this here. This is from the Associated Press. What's the next step for Black reparations in San Francisco, by Janie Har, H-A-R, March 15th, 2023 is when this article came out. All right. So hopefully that sheds some light on more on our conversation today on the culture with Faraji Muhammad. Suzette Speaks was sitting in for Faraji. And I know I was going fast. We was trying to get in a lot of information in a short period of time. Okay. All right. If you like this type of information, be sure to support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also, register for the online history classes that I teach, because while I was on the show, somebody posted in the comments, and Suzette Speaks read the comments. Do I teach history classes? Do I teach classes on reparations? I teach online history classes. We discuss reparations some in the classes, but more importantly, we deal with history. So there's two main history classes that I teach: 12-week online history courses, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Kemet's one of the original names for Egypt. The Ma'afa is a Kiswahili term referring to the Great Disaster, our Holocaust, the transatlantic slave trade. Teach this class Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Register right now for it. Click right here, register for the full course. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. So on Saturday, March 18th at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, I'm doing a free online lecture, Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. And so click right here to register for that also. And even if you missed that free online lecture, it will be archived, so you'll still be able to register. So go ahead and register now, and you'll be able to watch it even after the lecture is over with, because it will be archived. And then on Sundays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I teach Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, the U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power movement. We look at history from 1800 through 1968, understand what leads up to the Civil War taking place. We look at the Haitian Revolution and the Louisiana Purchase, because those two events are related. And we go through and look at Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, Jim Crow era, Great Migration, World War I, World War II, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power movement, to understand what happened to us after slavery ended, what were the laws and policies put in place to put us in the predicament we're in today, to understand where we need to go from here. Okay, so this is Black resistance movements, and you can register for that as well. That's on sale, $80, regularly $130. Okay, and we have a bundle pack of courses there also. All right, and also you can support the African History Network, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, or through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. When you register for the online courses that I teach, when you pay for the online courses, or you support us through Cash App or PayPal, or buy my lectures, my digital downloads, my lectures, this helps finance the African History Network. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, pay some of the bills, etc. Finance the radio show, the Sunday night radio show, the African History Network show. All right, we have to get out of here right now. It's correct wrong behaviors, not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace. Hotep, everybody. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Join me Saturday, March 18th, 2023. 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for my 12-week online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a fantastic online course that I teach, and we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Visit my website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. We have the information right on the homepage of the website. You can register for this online course. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. So I teach this class 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturdays. If you missed any of the previous classes, as soon as you register, you'll be able to watch them. So the class is on sale, $80, regularly $130. And even after this 12-week online course is over, you can go back and watch the entire course. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. We also have a preview of the online course right here on the homepage of our website and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. And this deals with African empires that Europeans tried to steal and claim as their own. So we can't start the study of our history in slavery. We have to deal with thousands of years of history that leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We can't start in the 1400s when the Portuguese get involved. We can't start in 1619 when the White Lion pirate ship comes into Virginia, okay, with those 20 and odd Africans on it. We have to deal with the history chronologically, and we also have to look at the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who are going to take the teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt into Europe and bring Europe out of the dark ages. Okay. So I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, and we bring history to life. We deal with a timeline of history also. And this is a online course that I've been teaching on and off since 2017. I put together the curriculum. I've been studying history 33 years. I'm a historian and the host of the African History Network show for 13 years. Now, this course not only deals with the transatlantic slave trade, but we deal with thousands of years of history that leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. August 20th, 2019 marked the 400th year anniversary of the 20 and odd Africans who came into Point Comfort. August 2016-19 in the colony that would be known as Virginia. And that year was known as the year of return, and many African Americans were reconnecting to Africa and traveling to Ghana and other West African countries. When we discuss the transatlantic slave trade, we have to first understand that African people are the original people of North, Central, or South America, and we've been in the land we call the United States of America. We've been in the land that we call the United States of America going back at least 51,700 years. So we look at archaeological discoveries that have taken place over the last 15 to 20 years. We look at Dr. David Imhotep's book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, and I've interviewed him about 13 times in the African History Network show. We know his book is backed up by 713 footnotes, 7 peer-reviewed articles. Page 14 of his book, he lays out 13 different types of evidence, thoroughly documenting an African presence in the area today we call South Carolina, going back at least 51,700 years ago. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints, and lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeleton structures, and tools. These were of the Khoisan. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. They are the short-statured Africans, okay? And a October 2012 genetic study published in Science magazine found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 100,000 years ago. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population had separated so early from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. So we take you through our history chronologically. We look at different archaeological discoveries that are causing scientists and archaeologists to push the timelines back. They're realizing that all of this is much older than we thought. The deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets, the more research they do, the older we get, okay? Like this discovery here in February 2010 on Crete, new evidence of very ancient mariners. This article from the New York Times, and it deals with evidence on the Greek island of Crete where they date stone tools dating back at least 130,000 years ago. Crete has been an island for more than 5 million years, which basically implies people had to have sailed there. We look at this discovery here from Morocco, June of 2017, where they found remains of Homo sapiens dating back at least 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. But the earliest previous Homo sapien bones dated back only 195,000 years ago in Ethiopia. Okay, so this is over 100,000 years prior to that. So what we see is that African people are much older than what we have originally been told. We look at the African presence in Asia, okay, as well. We look at the African presence in Mexico, like with the Olmecs, and we look at the Mandinka Egyptian Olmec connection that Dr. David Imhotep deals with in The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. We look at the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who go into the Iberian Peninsula today known as Spain and Portugal. And it's going to be these teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, that bring Europe out of the Dark Ages, okay? So we deal with all this in this 12-week online history course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they didn't teach you in school. We'll look at different African symbols like the Tekken. There were over 1,200 Tekkenu all throughout ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Today, they're less than 12. And when we look at the Washington Monument, that is an ancient African symbol called a Tekken, which represents the resurrection of the African king Asar in the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. We know there were approximately 1,200 Tekkenu built in ancient times in ancient Kemet, but only about a dozen are found today. Many of the Tekkenu removed from Egypt are now in Istanbul, Turkey, London, England, Paris, France, Berlin, Germany, New York, Rome, Italy, Vatican City, and elsewhere throughout the world. The Tekkenu are now called obelisks by their new owners, and few know their origin or that they symbolize the resurrection of the African king Asar. So one of the books that we use in the class is Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. This comes from page 17. You don't have to buy any of these books, but we use them as reference and I show you the text on the screen. Okay, so if you want to buy the books for your library, you can, but you don't have to feel obligated to do that. And then coming from Aset and Heru, you get the Black Madonna and Child, which is worshipped all throughout Europe, especially in France. There are over 300 images and statues of the Black Madonna and Child. Then you get the decolorized version with the white Mary and Jesus. Okay, so we go throughout history to understand what happened to us. We look at the presence of African people in the Americas prior to Christopher Columbus as well. And then we go through and look at this history chronologically to see what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And we analyze that as well. We look at different African civilizations, whether it's ancient Nubia, whether it's ancient Kemet, Carthage, Axum, Numidia, okay, to get a better understanding of this history. And one of the reasons why African history and culture is so important is because it's our history and culture that gives us our foundation. It gives us our values, our interests, and our principles. This gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. And it's our African principles, our values, our interests, and our principles, and that cultural paradigm that influence our economic empowerment and our political empowerment. So we have to have a synthesis of all three of these as opposed to just one of them. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history, because politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. And we know is laws and policies that also shape historical events. Laws, policies, and conditions shape historical events. Okay, so the more that you understand about history, the more you understand about politics. And so we have to understand history, law, economics, and politics. So we deal with the history of the Moors in Europe as well. One of the books that we use in the class is Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan van Sertima. We look at General Tariq ibn Ziyad, who in 711 AD led his army into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, and they're going to conquer the Vandals and the Visigoths and settle there in southern Spain also. Okay. All right. And we definitely have to deal with Christopher Columbus, who helped to lay the foundation for slavery, racism, and capitalism, the exploitation of indigenous people. He helped really to lay that and expand the transatlantic slave trade, because Columbus and his 4 voyages are going to lead to the Anciento de Negros being signed by King Charles V in August of 1518. Okay. We talk about people like the Right Reverend Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas. And we know the Anciento de Negros drastically expands the transatlantic slave trade, and it gives a license to European slave traders and slave trading companies to provide Spanish colonies with African slaves. We look at where Columbus went on his 4 voyages, because he never came to the land that we call the United States of America. The closest he came here is Cuba, which is 90 miles away. Okay, so people need to stop saying that Columbus discovered America. Yes, there were African people and Native Americans already here, but he never even came to the land that we call the United States of America. So this is just a sample of the type of information that we deal with in this 12-week online course that I teach. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, is on sale right now at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. It's on sale $80, regularly $130. We do the sessions live Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next class is Saturday, March 18th. You don't have to be live in class. You can watch it archived. Even a year from now, 2 years from now, you'll still have access to the full class. You can still go back and watch it. Okay. Now, we have a bundle pack of courses, so you get both classes that I teach for $120. And then the class that I teach on Sundays is Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Okay. Next class is Sunday, March 19th, 2023. We teach this 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same format as the first class, same price and structure as well. All right. And registering for these online courses. This helps support the African History Network. This helps to financially support the African History Network so we can keep doing the research, stay on the air broadcasting the African History Network show, pay some of the bills, etc., upgrade equipment, all of that. Okay. We look at history from 1800 to 1968, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, the Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power movement. So we look at the Haitian Revolution, the U.S. Civil War, the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, because the Haitian Revolution and the Louisiana Purchase are related. We look at what leads to the Civil War taking place, the Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, Jim Crow era, Civil Rights Movement, Great Migration, 1915, 1970, World War I, World War II, Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement. Okay. We go through and look at this 168-year period of history to understand what happened to us after slavery ended. What were the laws and policies put in place to put us in the predicament that we're in today, and also understand how history is repeating itself with voter suppression laws that are targeting us, increases in domestic terrorism, increases in hate crimes against us as well. Okay. Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Also on Saturday, March 18th, I'm doing a free online lecture, because March is Women's History Month, also Black Women's History Month. I'm doing a free online lecture Saturday, March 18th, 12 noon to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. So we'll look at numerous profiles of African women all throughout our history, from antiquity to the Civil Rights Movement to African goddesses. Everybody from Queen Nzinga to my aunt, Ya Santiwa, Queen T, Queen Charlotte Sophia, Angela Davis, Valerie Thomas, Madam C.J. Walker, her mentor, Annie Turnbull Malone, Asada Shakur, Dr. Patricia Bath, and many others. This is a free online lecture that I'm doing Saturday, March 18th, 12 noon to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for this online lecture. And even if you miss it, if you can't join us live, you'll still be able to watch it on demand. It'll be archived. We're going to record it and it will be archived. Okay. So visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, for great African women in history, the mothers of civilization. We deal with some well-known and not so well-known African women in our history from all different time periods. If you'd like this type of information, also, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. We have the information on the homepage of our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. And if you've taken any of my online courses in the past, okay, if you pay for any of my online courses in the past, you get a 50% discount on our course bundle pack. So you get the course bundle pack on sale, 50% off. So it'll be $60. That's a $300 value on the course bundle pack. There'll also be 5 of my lectures in the video library that'll be uploaded also. So you get that bonus. So that's a $300 value. Email me at ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com, ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com. If you've taken any of our online courses in the past, you are a returning student, and we're going to give you 50% discount on the bundle pack of our classes. All right, look, we have to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network right now is correct your own behavior. It's not over till we win. Watch me on Fridays, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Media Network, or follow Roland on Facebook and YouTube at Roland Martin. And then also watch me normally on Mondays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Faraji Muhammad Show, The Culture. Okay. And I was on Thursday, March 16th, because I wasn't on this past Monday. And that's on Roland's network, also the Black Star Media Network. And be sure to listen to my radio show, the African History Network Show, Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF here in Detroit. And also when we're on live, we broadcast on Facebook and YouTube, the radio show, The African History Network on Facebook, Michael Imhotep on YouTube. We have our social media platforms here. And also you can listen to audio podcasts of the African History Network show. Just click right here to listen to podcasts, or wherever you get your audio podcasts from. Search for the African History Network show. We're on iHeartRadio,